Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, Part 6, in which all our protagonists find the thin veneer of tranquility in their lives tested by family and friends, with farcical and tragic consequences. Chapter 2. The entire company of women gathered on the terrace. They generally liked to sit there after dinner, but today they also had things to do. Besides the sewing of little shirts and the knitting of baby blankets with which they were all occupied, jam was being made there according to a method new to Agafya Mikhailovna, without the addition of water. Kitty was introducing this new method which they used at home. Agafya Mikhailovna, who had been in charge of it before, considering that nothing done in the Levines' house could be bad, had put water in the strawberry and wild strawberry jam all the same, insisting that it could not be done otherwise. She had been caught at it, and now raspberry jam was being made in front of everyone, and Agafya Mikhailovna had to be brought to believe that jam without water could turn out well. Agafya Mikhailovna, with a flushed and upset face, her hair tousled, her thin arms bared to the elbows, rocked the basin in circular movements over the brazier, and stared gloomily at the raspberry jam, wishing with all her heart that it would thicken before it was cooked through. The princess, feeling that Agafya Mikhailovna's wrath must be directed at her, as the chief adviser on making raspberry jam, tried to pretend she was busy with something else and not interested in the jam, talked about unrelated things, but kept casting sidelong glances at the brazier. "I always buy dresses for my maids myself, at a discount," the princess said, continuing the conversation they had begun. "Shouldn't you skim it now, dear?" she added, addressing Agafya Mikhailovna. "It's quite unnecessary for you to do it yourself, and it's hot." She stopped Kitty. "I'll do it," said Dolly, and getting up she began drawing the spoon carefully over the foaming sugar, tapping it now and then to knock off what stuck to it onto a plate, which was already covered with a bright-colored yellow-pink scum, with an undercurrent of blood-red syrup. "How they'll lick it up from their tea," she thought of her children, remembering how she herself, as a child, had been surprised that grown-ups did not eat the best part, the scum. "Stiva says it's much better to give them money." Dolly, meanwhile, continued the interesting conversation they had begun about the best way of giving presents to servants. "But how can you give money?" the princess and Kitty said with one voice. "They appreciate presents so." "Last year, for instance, I bought not poplin exactly, but something like it, for Matryona Semyonovna," said the princess. "I remember. She wore it for your name-day party. The sweetest pattern, so simple and noble. I'd have liked to make it for myself, if she hadn't had it. Like Varenka's, so sweet and inexpensive." "Well, it seems to be ready now," said Dolly, pouring the syrup off the spoon. "When it leaves a tail, it's ready to cook. Cook it a little longer, Agafya Mikhailovna." "These flies," Agafya Mikhailovna said crossly. "It'll be all the same," she added. "Ah, how sweet he is. Don't frighten him," Kitty said suddenly, looking at a sparrow that had alighted on the railing and, turning over a raspberry stem, began pecking at it. "Yes, but you keep away from the brazier," said her mother. "A propos de Varenka," Kitty said in French, which they had been speaking all the while, so that Agafya Mikhailovna would not understand them. "You know, maman, for some reason I expect a decision today. You understand what I mean. How good it would be." "What an expert matchmaker, though," said Dolly. "How carefully and skillfully she brings them together." "No, tell me, maman, what do you think?" "What is there to think? He, meaning Sergei Ivanovitch, could always make the foremost match in Russia. He's not so young any more, but I know that Minnie would marry him even now. She's very kind, but he could—" "No, mamma, you must understand why one couldn't think of anything better for him or for her. First, she's lovely," Kitty said, counting off one finger. "He likes her very much, it's true," Dolly confirmed. "Then he occupies such a position in society that he has absolutely no need for a wife with a fortune or social position. He needs one thing, a good and sweet wife, a peaceful one." "Yes, with her he can be peaceful," Dolly confirmed. "Third, that she should love him. And it would be so good. I'm just waiting for them to come back from the forest, and everything will be decided. I'll see at once from their eyes. I'd be so glad. What do you think, Dolly?" "Don't get excited. You must never get excited." "But I'm not excited, Mamma. I think he'll propose today." It's so strange when and how a man proposes. There's some obstacle, and suddenly it's broken through," said Dolly, smiling pensively and recalling her past with Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Mamma, how did Papa propose to you?" Kitty asked suddenly. "There was nothing extraordinary. It was quite simple," replied the princess, but her face became all bright at the memory. "No, but how? Anyway, you loved him before you were allowed to talk?" Kitty felt a special charm in being able to talk with her mother as an equal about these most important things in a woman's life. "Of course I loved him. He used to visit us in the country." "But how did it get decided, Mamma?" "You probably think you invented something new? It was all the same. It got decided by looks, by smiles." "How well you put it, Mamma. Precisely by looks and smiles," Dolly confirmed. "But what words did he say?" "What did Kostya say to you?" "He wrote with chalk. It was amazing. It seems so long ago," she said. And the three women fell to thinking about the same thing. Kitty was the first to break the silence. She recalled that whole last winter before her marriage and her infatuation with Vronsky. "One thing, that former passion of Varenka's," she said, recalling it by a natural train of thought. "I wanted somehow to tell Sergei Ivanovitch, to prepare him. They, all men," she added, "are terribly jealous of our past." "Not all," said Dolly. "You're judging by your husband. He still suffers from the memory of Vronsky. Yes, it's true?" "It is," Kitty replied, smiling pensively with her eyes. "Only I don't know," the princess mother defended her motherly supervision of her daughter. "What past of yours could bother him? That Vronsky courted you? That happens to every girl." "Well, that's not what we mean," Kitty said, blushing. "No? Excuse me," her mother went on. "And then you yourself didn't want to let me have a talk with Vronsky, remember?" "Oh, Mamma," Kitty said with a suffering look. "Nowadays there's no holding you back. Your relations couldn't go further than was proper. I myself would have called him out. However, it won't do for you to get excited, my dear. Please remember that and calm yourself." "I'm perfectly calm, Maman." "How happily it turned out for Kitty that Anna came then," said Dolly. "And how unhappily for her. Precisely the opposite," she added, struck by the thought. "Anna was so happy then, and Kitty considered herself unhappy. How completely opposite. I often think about her." "A fine one to think about. A vile, disgusting woman, quite heartless," said the mother, unable to forget that Kitty had married not Vronsky but Levin. "Who wants to talk about that?" Kitty said in vexation. I don't think about it. I don't want to think. And I don't want to think, she repeated, hearing her husband's familiar steps on the terrace steps. And I don't want to think about what? Asked Levine, coming out on the terrace. But no one answered him, and he did not repeat the question. I'm sorry I've disturbed your women's kingdom, he said, looking around at them all with displeasure, realizing that they had been talking about something that they would not have talked about in his presence. For a second he felt that he shared Agafia Mikhailovna's feeling, displeasure that the raspberry jam had been made without water, and in general with the alien Sherbatsky influence. He smiled, however, and went over to Kitty. Well, how are you? He asked, looking at her with the same expression with which everyone now addressed her. Oh, fine, said Kitty, smiling. And you? They hold 3 times more than a cart, so shall we go for the children? I told them to harness up. What? You want to take Kitty in the wagonette? Her mother said reproachfully. But at a walk, princess. Levine never called the princess maman, as sons-in-law do, and that displeased her. But though he loved and respected the princess very much, Levine could not call her that without profaning his feelings for his dead mother. Come with us, maman, said Kitty. I don't want to witness this folly. I'll go on foot, then. It's good for me. Kitty got up, went over to her husband, and took him by the hand. Good, but everything in moderation, said the princess. Well, Agafia Mikhailovna, is the jam done? Said Levine, smiling at Agafia Mikhailovna and wishing to cheer her up. Is it good, the new way? Must be good. We'd say it's overcooked. So much the better, Agafia Mikhailovna. It won't get moldy. Our ice has all been melted by now, and there's nowhere to keep it, said Kitty, understanding her husband's intention at once, and addressing the old woman with the same feeling. Besides, your pickling is so good. My mamma says she's never tasted the like anywhere, she said, smiling and straightening the old woman's kerchief. Agafia Mikhailovna looked crossly at Kitty. Don't comfort me, mistress. I just look at you and him, and I feel cheered, she said, and this crude expression, him instead of the master, touched Kitty. Come mushrooming with us. You can show us the places. Agafia Mikhailovna smiled and shook her head as if to say, I'd gladly be angry with you, but it's impossible. Please do as I advise you, said the old princess. Cover the jam with a piece of paper and wet it with rum. It will never get moldy, even without ice. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.